Good morning. Good afternoon.
Hi, Dana. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm well. I'm just going to adjust myself so we've not got lots of ceiling.
Just floating head. I know. We're all getting pretty good at positioning ourselves in the frame.
Yeah. How are you? It's nice to say hello face to face.
Absolutely.
And speak at last. Yeah.
Yes. Maz is coming in a minute. He is very anxious to say hello to you.
Nice.
I think we're good. I mean, spring is very slow to come where we live. So like we had snow twice this week. Yeah, and then it melted and then it came back. And so it's been frustrating. Like spring always is here, because you'll have one beautiful day and you'll think, okay, it's here. And then it'll go below freezing, and so it's a pain.
What's your average daytime temperature then just now?
Dr. Mary.
Yes.
What would our average centigrade temperature be right now?
Now?
Yeah, come and say hello.
I will. I'll get a chair.
Don't hover, it's embarrassing.
Scoot up.
Hey, my old friend.
Hey, Sans, how you doing?
This is really surreal, isn't it? Oh, hugs to you both. Look at that. There we go.
And your kids look fantastic. Congratulations.
Oh, they're crazy. They honestly, so we have this sort of understanding, or we try to develop an understanding about working space in the house, which is kind of interesting, of course, because it's their house too, and
Right.
It's very much an open shed. So Andy's working at home, and one of my mentors, my supervisor, had explained to me about Huggy meetings and non-Huggy meetings. So what that means, now we have a love heart that hangs outside of the door of, this is my office. I have a very big home office. I'm very blessed. So the outside of the door handle has a heart if it's a Huggy meeting, which means the kids can come in and have a hug if they need a hug. And or I will put my scarf, I've always got a neck scarf on, and I'll put a scarf outside the door, which would indicate it's a non-Huggy meeting, you can't come in. So literally a second before I click this button, they're mental. They're in the room behind this one, singing every song from Frozen 2, every single one at the top of their voice, with their own chorus going, it's a non-Huggy meeting. Like really loud. So my blood pressure was slightly elevated.
You need to practice some mindfulness, Sandra.
I think I need to find out about mindfulness.
I think you might want to look into that.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm used to them. I've lived with them, but they're good kids. They're really good. They are a pain in the arse at times, but they also bring us so much joy. And for an aging mama like me, who started life late in everything, they help to keep me feel, may not feel it a lot of the time, but they help to keep us feel young. So we're very grateful.
How old are they?
So Joshua is 8. He's, well, nearly 8.5. And Katie Rose is just turned 5.
Wow.
So I had Joshua, I think I was nearly 39 when I had him. And then I had Kate. I think I was classed as an old mum. I think I was heading, what age is she? 5? I was 41 when I had her. So yeah. quite late on in the day.
Well, what works. Yeah. I mean, you got to have a whole grown-up life before you became a mom.
That's perfect. Yeah, and I think we have more patience now. I think you certainly have more time. Our careers, Maz, your career, Dana, you have lots of opportunities to travel, go different places, and have that real spaciousness. So I think we've lived a whole other life before they came and gave us this life. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and for me, it was the exact opposite. I had no life. So I was barely 23 when Quinn was born. But that means at 41, I sent him off to college. So
incredible.
It's an incredible thing to be a very, very young empty nester, because I didn't know any different.
We're trying not to look smug around our friends. Who's still
Yeah.
kids at
Who
home.
are trying to homeschool and work, and oh my gosh, I can't imagine that additional pressure. Speaking of mindfulness and just work-life balance.
I mean, all we've got now is a 13-year-old golden retriever. So, you know.
I know, your dog. It's amazing. Yeah. I think it is. I think it is interesting, these two sort of different time frames. Yeah, you know, it's like my sister. She's not that much older than me, and her kids, you know, they're in their 30s now, and that seems ridiculous, you know, that my kids are this age, her kids are that age, and so she's the empty nester. And but I think that's the thing. I think for us, we have these two lovely little beings who are such a distraction, who will keep you present. You know, you can only be with them, and the mind will wander, it will do its own thing, but they very quickly bring you back to base, you know, because their reality exists only in seconds, you know. So this moment and then this moment.
Yeah, it's an immediacy. It's very different than being a grown-up.
So are you guys working from home, Maz? What's your situation? What are you doing, both of you? Because do you work in the same institute?
No,
I'm not at a university. I run a nonprofit.
And is it your own business, Dana?
No, the nonprofit sector in America is its own subset. So I have a board. I was hired by the board. So no, I didn't start it. The organization's 50 years old, and I've been there for 10.
Wow. And what do you do? What's the day job? What does it look like?
I advocate for art. So I represent all of the arts organizations in our 3 communities, all of the artists. I fight for funding and inclusion, and you know, I'm an art advocate.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's good. I've enjoyed it mostly.
Yeah. And it feels, I don't know, when you talk to people whose jobs are so different, I notice that I feel suddenly really dumb. That's the thought, you know, like, oh, I wonder, you know, I can hear all of these words. And I'm like, yeah, but what do you do? You know, so you're trying to get funding from other bodies to help people establish themselves as artists? Or?
So, you know, in Europe, the arts are supported at kind of a state or federal level. And in America, we have a federal organization called the National Endowment for the Arts that does get funding from our federal legislature, but it's not nearly enough. So my job is to fundraise in large ways. So I'm meeting with business people. I'm meeting with philanthropists. I'm spending time with foundations. I spend time with our elected local and state leaders, just trying to kind of prove the value of why investing in the arts is a good economic decision, is a good mental and physical health decision, is a good
absolutely. That's given me the goosebumps, because creativity is exactly what we need to stimulate certain emotional centers in the brain. To help.
And you know what's so interesting about this particular time is that the arts sector, as with most of the world, has been completely shut down. But every single person who's got access because they're literate or has an internet connection is consuming more art than in any other period in human history. So there's this enormous disconnect between the fact that it's kind of keeping people sane and saving families' lives, and the fact that it needs to be paid for because it is a product of people. You know, if we were all going to the dentist every day, we wouldn't say, well, you know, everybody goes to the dentist, so I don't need to pay for this, right? You know, you pay to go to the dentist. You need to pay to listen to music, to read a book, to see a musical, to enjoy all those things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and it is so important. And it's like all of these services that enhance our well-being. You know, you can't just get them off the shelf. They're not prescribed. Right. Although I don't know if in the States we have something now in the UK called social prescribing. Have you heard of this?
It's starting to make its way to the East Coast, where all good things start, and then, in about 30 years it'll hit us.
Yeah. So there's people within social, it's like a discrete group, if you like, who bridge between our NHS, our publicly funded health service, and GPs and social work departments. So these are all sort of discrete strands of our public health system. But the thing that people are now, for some reason, only catching up on is realizing that it's not just about the drugs or medication. There's so many other strands. So we have a team of people called social prescribers who will help people who have low mental health or anxiety disorders, sort of lower level emotional issues. It could be even self-esteem issues, so confidence, mums groups, mums with PND. And what they do is they'll go into that person's community and find out all about the community groups that are available, which will enhance an individual's well-being. So it could be walking groups, it could be art groups, mindfulness groups, just chit-chat groups, dementia cafes, things like that. And then the social prescriber, if the person doesn't feel confident in going, like if you have an anxiety disorder, your prescriber will go with you to help you build up that relational security, which is amazing. It's really interweaving those who are a bit removed from the community into the community in ways that actually build up their wholeness, which is so important,
Well, and so imperative to being a human, because it's not just about, so you have depression and you're prescribed a pill to manage the serotonin levels in your brain. And boy, that's the extent of science that I can discuss. Science left me, if it ever entered me, 1,000 years ago. But Maz is so proud of me for that. But I think that covers one piece of it, but it doesn't begin to address the emotional longing and the loneliness and all of the other aspects that a pill can never accomplish or solve. That can really only come from community. And at the end of the day, art is really about community making. And it's why it's just such a tragedy that we have decided to vilify it, or to at best treat it as a thing that you do maybe if you've done everything else, or you support it if everything else is at 100%, because it's frosting, not substance. And it's so substantive, and that's really the central core of the work that I do, is helping people understand the substance behind art.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, Sandra, because I feel like in looking at your website, actually our work is similar in very different ways, because you wouldn't really think that anybody would need to be told that like you should be present in your mind, and you should try to remove the negative and invite in the positive, and you should be gentle with yourself, and you should breathe. You wouldn't think you had to tell people that.
Yeah, but also maybe, not avoiding the negative, actually, because that filters our experience. That means that our preference is aligned to just looking for the good, which is not wrong. I think, especially like now in times of difficulty, it's really important that we don't scoot over things that are pleasant, positive, uplifting, and nourishing. I think one of the strongest things that mindfulness can help us with is growing this observational quality of our minds, and seeing our minds with a bit of space in between them. Yeah. So I came to mindfulness. Maybe we'll save this for the press record bit, but.
No, we're going. I decided we would just.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
We're just doing it.
Yes, because I knew it would be interesting for you and to connect.
Yeah. So I think the mindfulness thing is, it enables us. It's this quality of awareness that we all have. We can all be mindful, So mindfulness is simply knowing what's happening as it's happening. But, if we look at our minds, we can be mindful in times of difficulty, and what we'll see is all the negative comments and the criticisms. And then when we see this in ourselves, we then give ourselves a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
We compare ourselves to others, or we say, I'm so rubbish, I'm so weak, But so mindfulness, it helps us to develop a way of looking at our own minds, but with a bit of space in between what you see. So, for example, coming back to try and annotate this in a way that's very human, I came to mindfulness from a place of being really stressed in terms of my general life. I had just been promoted. I was given my own research group, and I felt very, very lucky. Had a multi-million-pound budget. I had people, had labs in different countries, but I didn't really know how to juggle all of the stuff. And I was working, might be similar to Maz, and the pathway that we take when we feel pressure. We want to do well. We want to do well for ourselves. We have high standards of succeeding. We want to prove ourselves capable, especially as a woman in science, Maz, right? There's a different, especially as a wee Scottish woman, actually, who barely.
Are you tiny, Sandra?
Yeah. Barely can.
I'm super tall. Did you know that?
No, well, I'm super short.
I'm a lot shorter than Maz.
Well, I'm apparently just tall enough.
Well, I was the one that would be, I'd be standing on the boxes to get up above the thing. So you have all these desires, don't you, to do well, and a mind that wants you to succeed. But we're a human body, we're a human mind. And you get into this point to succeed that you're just doing, working all hours. Interestingly, I do remember a time where I was working 12 hours days, and I described it in a piece of work that I was writing myself. My mind was like a flow chart, just wouldn't switch off. Just constant. But it was a right messy flow chart. It wasn't yes, no, like this. Blah, blah, blah. Looked like a cat had vomited a ball of tangled wool, really. And so my mind was a mess, and I lived like this for many years, being very troubled. But not many people would have known about it, because when you go to work, the mask goes on, the perfectionist, the scientist, the puffed out chest. But I was very broken on the inside, and my mind couldn't stop. So when I came to mindfulness, after living like this chaotic mind and not coping and thinking maybe one day I won't be here, because I won't be able to cope anymore. And I came to mindfulness, and they said to me, you have a little interview as a potential client, and the ologist man is just checking out, is she going to be all right? And the biggest thing that I learned was, because I was so self-aware, mindfulness is just about self-awareness, what's happening on the inside and knowing what's happening round about you on the outside. But I was so self-aware, all I could see was the negative. Then I didn't like it, so I was judging it. I loathed myself at times, so I needed to get it away. And all that did was create more mental tension, because you're in this place of thought, reaction, dislike, get rid. And then the body gets involved. It starts to feel the physiological effects of stress. The mind is busy, the body is fueled by adrenaline and cortisol. You're like this machine, just busy brain, busy body, and that cycle. And then in the first week of this mindfulness course, you're invited to share. You're in a group with so many different people with different experiences, different backgrounds, some very troubled people. Maybe people thought I was really troubled. And we had this one instruction, and it was to watch thoughts. And you're like, what? Watch a thought. Notice it coming in, can say hello, and then just leave it, watch it, say goodbye. And the man who instructed us, he was called Dr. John Ferguson. He was a clinical psychologist, one of the most gifted mentors and mindfulness teachers who supported me. And he knew my history, he knew my background, and he said, so for you, Sandra, especially just say hello thought. Notice my voice. Notice how kind I am to that thought that really drives you mental. It really frightens you, because I was frightened of my mind. That's the essence of it. I was so frightened. And he said, so I want you to kind of smile at the thought and say hello and tell it, you're worrying me. You're making me worried, but now I'm not thinking about you. I'm just letting it go. And I said, but why did I not need to get involved in it? Because I've spent years, I'm very good at thinking, you know, very good at analysing. If there's a problem, I'm your lady. I'm trained to do this. I'm a scientist. I can fix everything. And he said, but we don't fix it by those analytical means, my love. He said, we fix it by doing nothing. Doing nothing? Not arguing? Being kind to my mind? You joking? And so I practiced this for a whole week. And my poor body was trembling. It felt the effects, because what happens in the mind happens in the body. The two are joined up through our best broadband connection, if you like, our internet that is the nervous system. And over the course of 1 week, after learning to observe thoughts and not being involved with them, even the toxic ones, even the negative ones, the fear in the mind, the stress in the body went like that. 6 years I lived like this, and within 1 week, gone. No stress, just like that. So I think just underlining that point about mindfulness, yes, our awareness helps us to see the good, the wonderful, the joyful, not just to see it, but to feel it in ways that are so, gone goosebumpy, so visceral, a smile, connection with an old friend, just sitting quietly in the back. But it helps us not to be afraid of the things that are tricky in the mind, because with time and with practice, using breathing techniques, we learn to settle the body down, yeah? And when the body is settled, the mind learns from the body too. And we can create this quieter space to see the mind, and we don't have to avoid it.
That's so beautiful.
That is fantastic.
Do you know Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic?
Mm-mm.
Do you know who
you
Elizabeth
want to say
Gilbert
about
is?
it?
So Elizabeth Gilbert wrote Eat, Pray, Love.
Yes.
Big book she wrote, but she wrote this other book called Big Magic, which is one of my most favorite books. I probably reread it 4 times a year. But she has this chapter where she talks about the fact that fear really controlled her life for a lot of her childhood, and that she kind of thought there was something good about being fearful until she realized how boring really it was and what a waste of time. But now she talks about if she is about to embark on a new book, for instance, fear will show up and say, well, move over, I need to drive. And she'll say, fear, you may join me in the car, but you'll be sitting in the back seat, and you don't get to drive. You don't even get to control the radio. You can come along because I'm a kind person and I will allow you to join me, but you don't get to control any part of the journey.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's absolute mindfulness in a nutshell. And so talking of fear, and maybe sometimes with mindfulness, as soon as we start to say, oh, we just breathe, suddenly people conjure up, oh yeah, it's all woolly. Yeah. There's like kind of little invisible fairies sprinkling magic dust. So that doesn't happen in my life, I'm afraid to say. It takes hard work and the access of good neuroscience and understanding of our body's physiology. So fear is one of our biggest things right now, of course, in our lives, which will have the potential to dominate how we think and how we act and how we live. And I love that example, how you said, yeah, you don't get to drive. So interestingly, another Gilbert from the UK, Professor Paul Gilbert, an inspiring mentor, and Hannah, his daughter, Dr. Hannah Gilbert, they're really quite humble people, but they're one of our UK's biggest compassion training developers. And the thing about fear is they always say, don't let fear run your show. And mindfulness lets us see who is running our show, what emotion is running the show. Because when we learn to observe and study ourselves non-judgmentally, with kindness and with calmness, we actually get to see habitual patterns. Yeah, it's this sort of science and self-study. You get to see what stories repeat themselves on the crap carousel. So when you're tired, for me, oh, I'm not good enough, you know, I'm not a good enough this, I'm not a good enough that. Or if I'm impatient, I can hear it, the words, let's just stop this. The stop this voice comes out, you know. So you get to see this. And then we understand very clearly from the neuroscience that actually we're functioning from a place of threat. Our threat system in the brain is being activated. And the three big emotions that activate that are fear, anger, and sadness. So when you get to study yourself, you get to see all your bad habits, and actually you can look in on them, understanding that we're human, understanding that we're not robots, we're not pre-programmed to be perfect, but we can be compassionate because we're in a bit of a pickle, because we're a mess, because we're a shouty mum, because we're messing up in our lives. But we don't need to turn against ourselves. We can make a choice who runs the show and how we respond to that. So rather than layering on criticism or blame or shame or suffering or regret, we can notice it, notice the feelings, name them, like you're saying in your illustration. And then that really brings us into a moment of present-centered attention. We've got it. And when we're in that moment, we can make very helpful choices as to what to do next. We're no longer functioning on automatic pilot. We are upfront with the present moment. And that makes mindfulness sound really easy, doesn't it? You see what's happening as it's happening, get to know it, name it, understand it, be kind to yourself, and then say, what do I need to do next? What do I need to hear? What action do I need to take? And how am I going to do that? Yeah.
It's interesting because when you said it makes it sound easy, doesn't it? It reminded me that at the start of every winter, because we have really, really intense winters here with a lot of ice, there's a reminder that goes out across the region that basically says, if you're driving your car and a deer crosses the road, hit the deer. Don't put your brakes on because that's likely to flip your car. Just hit the deer. Well, that sounds really easy. But what I think to myself at the start of every winter is that will not be my instinct. My instinct will be to save the deer, to slam on my brakes, and to do what I need to do to avoid the collision. Because it's easy to say things like, you know, hear your negative thought, acknowledge it, watch it, observe it, and then send it on its way. That's an easy thing to say. It's much harder to do.
Yeah.
And if it weren't hard to do, we would all be doing it.
Yeah. And I think also it takes practice. It's called mindfulness practice for a reason. Yeah. And in terms of our brain, our tricky human brain, what we practice grows stronger. So we were born not walking, and we stumbled and we crawled and we rolled over. But once the brain cells make this connection of when you do this little feat and your spine is strong enough and your muscles can support you, all these neurons wiring together, they remember it and they get stronger, they get fused. Yeah. So with mindfulness, everything is delivered in stages. We always start small. Yeah. We always start small. So we might just start with noticing a thought and then training our attention to be with the breathing. So notice distraction, come back to the breathing. And then we'll get good at doing that over time. And the reason we start off with that is the breath is always there. It's like an anchor. It'll hold us steady in a storm. So I can let my mind go, get all mixed up in that mishmash of wool, and I can notice it and say, just come back here, there, here. That's the practice. So that could take a week to get that. Every time we're doing something and establishing a new pattern of behavior, the brain remembers it. It starts to wire itself differently. And the more we practice that, not being involved with thoughts, coming to the breathing, noticing, but choosing to come back to the breathing, that habit will become stronger. And that's stage sort of 1. So it takes practice, but our amazing brain can rewire itself and develop new habits. And so for me, just thinking of the tricky thoughts that primed me and made my emotional life very spiky, every time I wasn't being involved in the what if thought and when will and why is, those brain cells that made those feelings, made those thoughts feel very visceral and very raw and frightening, start to detangle because they're kind of here. And I'm like, oh, I see you. So the first stage of that was not being involved in the thought, but my body was still frightened. And then when I'm not being involved in the thought, that neural pathways, it's dissipating, it's dissolving, and new ones are forming. So it is a practice, and it takes great effort, but the good news is it doesn't take long. That's the amazing thing. You know, we can practice mindfulness for as little as 7 minutes, 20 minutes a day, daily, 3, 4, 5 times a week. That's enough. And the science tells us, the clinical trials show us, that if people are on appropriate courses with good facilitators, good regulated teachers, and they stick to the course curriculum, in 8 weeks, their life can be very different. And people with recurrent depression, recurrent relapsed depression, these appropriate courses are as effective as medication. And I think that's amazing. And I know it from myself, and I'm privileged to see it in many other people too.
So I was going to ask you, because I can't imagine that you started taking mindfulness courses and immediately dropped your very high pressure, high powered position. There must have been a period of crossing over. So how did learning this mindfulness help you start to both manage the high pressure, high stress position better for yourself, but also realize that that was not the direction you wanted to continue, despite your incredible education and the power and position that you had?
Yeah, it's a lovely question, and a joy to answer actually, because it takes me back to a really interesting phase of my life. So one of the things with mindfulness, it's not just about techniques. Yeah, we learn many techniques, and there's hundreds of them, there's thousands of them that start off with the same simple practice, but we also learn and train in attitudes. If you can imagine trying to not react to thoughts, you need to be quite patient. And often at first we're really impatient. And one of the reasons I practice mindfulness is because I'm really impatient. So we train in attitudes such as curiosity, patience, trust, kindness, non-doing. And I'll drop that into why in a little minute. So coming back to your question, here I was at the end of my 8-week mindfulness course. I was running a group. We had quite a high profile project that was funded by the UK government, the Department of Health. It's a really long study, and the experiment took years before it would get data, and we were in the cusp of producing lots of papers, which it was really important at that time. And I maybe had just not far given birth to Joshua. I had finished my 8-week mindfulness course. And I knew halfway through that course that I was going to give up science as soon as I possibly could to learn to teach others how to cultivate the skill of mindful awareness and how they could reduce their own personal level and professional levels of stress and enhance their well-being in life. And so that was around about 2015, and I kind of kept practicing my mindfulness daily, and I was still working part-time because I was a new mum, so I was working 3 days. And I started to look online at what was needed to be a mindfulness teacher, and I thought, oh, I could do this, I could do anything. And I realized it wasn't a short journey, it was quite a long path. So I decided to undertake a master's degree whilst I was working, and start to learn more about the academic side of mindfulness, the theory, because I have a love of learning, and mindfulness relative to my current job was so great in my life that I wanted to know more and more about it. So I undertook a master's degree. I've still not finished it yet. I'm on a gap 2 or 3 years. I think
your other education kind of, you're all right, Sandra. You've kind of almost made it.
I don't know if I'm going to finish it actually, but anyway, I did 2 years of that, and at the end of the first year, I made the decision to leave my job. But it was really tricky because I was pregnant with my second child at some point in this journey, and then you can't just go leaving a job when you're pregnant, and your employer doesn't want to sack you or anything like that when you're pregnant. So I had to really think of a clever way how to kind of exit this, and it turned out I just had this huge amount of trust that the path that was carved out for me would happen in its own time. So it took a number of years and months, but eventually an opportunity came where I could leave work, and someone would come in and look after the staff and look after the experiments, and then I was kind of freed to give birth to my second child, and then start to teach mindfulness. And it was the biggest thing. I knew it was the right path. I did give up tens of £1,000s of a salary, and certainly have no hope of recouping that in this little offering, but that's okay, because I know that the work that I do has much more meaning than that ever will.
Wow.
I love that, and because this conversation that you and I are having is part of this kind of side project that I'm working on, which isn't at all related to my professional job, but I hope will become my job. And so just yesterday, we were having the conversation that I am going to very likely pull back on some of my day job as well, and kind of go down to 3 days a week. And I think there's something really privileged, and I have to acknowledge that, about being able to look at the money and say, I can let that go. I mean, I think so many people would love to be able to pursue what they're truly passionate about, but they have to pay a mortgage, and they've got to put food on their tables and clothe their children. And I feel so fortunate to be in a position where I can set a little bit of that aside. And it sounds like you also were able to do that. So maybe my follow-up question to that then is, I feel like perhaps you and I are more of the exception than the norm in terms of being able to just look at a paycheck and say, thank you, but I need to pursue something that isn't going to equal the value of this check. How can people who are not in a position to leave something stressful or something that doesn't feed their soul, how can they bring some of this to that, just to neutralize the negativity around it or the stress, and maybe even make it a positive?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. That's a tough one, because I think nothing's a quick fix in life. Yeah, nothing is a quick fix. Mindfulness isn't a quick fix. Our own self-development takes time, it takes effort. We sat with that decision-making process for months and months, actually, and it all depends on your lifestyle and your circumstances. We're not flashy people. We don't want so much in life, what's important to us is being connected, making time with each other, and keeping things really simple. Just having enough is enough. Whether it's stuff, don't spend lots on clothes, things like that. So in terms of where we're at in our lives and looking after ourselves when things aren't great, I think there's lots of different things that you can look at. And when things are difficult in the workplace setting, there's the whole professional arm of that, is the conversations between the employer, the employee, the whole organic workplace thing, which I won't comment on, that's so specific. But in terms of practicalities, is making sure you take your breaks, chunk your workload. Often when we're under pressure, I can look back in my own time when I was really under pressure, we don't take breaks, we don't stop. And because we think we've got so much to do, and more often than not we do, but because we've got so much to do, this little brain of ours, the biology is that it simply cannot function. It cannot function for 8 hours a day without being refueled. So a lot of us, we're a bit deluded because we think if we work more, we'll get more done. But actually we're exhausting our brain. We will hit the exhaustion funnel. And then that tends to translate into our home life as well, because we will bring work home, and then we will work even longer and spend less time with our children or our family members or our partners, or less time doing the things that gives us joy, makes us feel good, and takes us away from the work that we've already been doing. So that leads us into what's called the exhaustion funnel. And there's tiers of this, because what happens is we think, oh, I'll just work half an hour longer in the office. And that can really easily slip into 40 minutes to an hour. And that word that comes so automatically. And then it slips into our home life. So when we start to remove the things that make us feel good, help us feel relaxed, calm, nourished, or uplifted, we start to get into the exhaustion funnel, where all that we're doing is the work doing, sleeping less well. And when we sleep less well, our brain is tired, our body is tired. And when we're tired, neurologically or biologically, physiologically, then we will not work at our optimum, and our immune health suffers, so we'll get sicker more readily, and then we create this cycle. Sickness, can't function, work harder to meet deadlines, can't sleep, and we experience stress, right? So not necessarily in that order, but that's generally what can happen. So I think in terms of self-care, there's many things that we can do and absolutely should do to help promote our well-being, to enhance our immune health, and give us this sense of self-care. So mindfulness and meditation is absolutely one of the things that I think is a smart activity to practice for our mental health, for our emotional well-being, and actually for our immunological health too. There's many papers that are published which shows the clear benefits in all of these domains. It enhances relationships, it helps us reduce stress, helps us feel more content. So that's one thing that's a really helpful thing to look into. And if you look under, I was looking at self-care tips, and I'm just wondering if it's here. Yeah, I looked on the internet the other day for, just out of curiosity, what other people are saying self-care looks like. And there was a list of something like 27, and at least half of them are mindfulness or meditation based exercises. So I was quite astounded about that. So yeah, look. Being fully present and embracing the present moment, getting outside, noticing nature, being in touch with yourself, understanding your needs, and giving yourself what you need. Yeah. So I think that's one thing. Making sure you get outside. Now, we're all in a bit of a lockdown situation, so that can be tricky. But if we're able to get outside, make more of it. Yeah. Don't just go out for this 10-minute walk as fast as you can, get in and get out. If there's green trees, look at those. Look at the texture, look at the shape, look at the clouds, look at how they're moving, look for colour, look for people's faces being bright and smiley. These small things we can turn into bigger positive experiences when we look at them with fresh eyes, with a sense of appreciation, sense of joyfulness. Maybe a tree makes us think of a time that we've been on holiday and we can think, oh yeah, I remember that. So it can provoke happy memories. And doing more of the things that make you feel good on the inside. So we were sharing in our mindfulness course reunions this week. We're all in this lockdown. And I said, I want you to make a list of the things that make you feel nourished, lift your mood, make you smile, or help you feel relaxed and calm right now in the conditions that we find ourselves in. So the little clients, they were writing down their list, and it's amazing. I didn't imagine there would be so many things that we can still do that make us feel good. So a lot of them were creative-based things. So baking, using our hands, drawing, doodling, even if we're not so good at art, using that word good in inverted commas, listening to music, singing along to music, moving, dancing, having the time to read a book that you've always wanted to read, joining online things, joining the little communities that are popping up all over the place, theatre groups, you know, in the UK. I don't know if you've got it. In the UK, there's all these musicals that have been broadcast. So all these things that maybe we didn't have access to that are now coming towards us that make us feel good. So it's getting over that barrier of saying, I need to do this, or the default of I'm just going to sit on my phone all night and scroll, post, complain, whinge, or actually consciously choose what you do with your time in order to support your well-being. So that's that difference between automatic pilot, they're just doing what you always do, or choosing 5, 10, 15 minutes to do something that will make you feel good.
We're so if you set aside the very real fears and loss and stress of this period of social isolation and global pandemic, which I am in no size, shape, or form trying to diminish those things. But if you can set those aside and stop to think about what has this time given you the opportunity to think about or to do, even in the midst of the fear and the isolation, there's some really profound learning and discovering that can come, because what else could have forced the whole planet to come to a standstill? Nothing. We were on such a ridiculous treadmill, moving at such an unconscious and frantic pace that I think it was virtually impossible to do some of what you're saying, because we just bought into the idea of, well, I have to do more and I have to do it faster and I have to get here and I've got to, this kind of ratcheting of growth and expansion and pressure and all of that we both put on ourselves and allow other people to put on us.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
So then it's easy in those moments to say, well, it's selfish for me to take 15 minutes for myself because I haven't seen my children all day, or I haven't seen my spouse all day, or I need to finish that email. Or, I mean, we can justify why we don't do this, but it's sort of like the planet stepped in and said, humans, you're missing your purpose and your calling, which is to take care of yourself so that you can better take care of others. And you can look around and see what's really here, not just this very tunneled vision of what you must do, but what you are afforded the luxury and the gift of doing.
Yeah, I think it's tricky, isn't it? So there has been the brakes put on in the world in many of our lives, and it is very difficult. And I'm very conscious of the range of reactions and way that people are affected. It's a spectrum of complete disaster, okayness, and maybe things aren't that different. But everyone is affected, and I think some people may be able to see a wider field of view, in that maybe there is something I can learn from this. Maybe I'm seeing that my pace of life has been too fast, and I'm now dictated to slow down. But I also think there will be people who will not be able to see that. You know, they won't see this as a learning opportunity. It will just be too tough for them, for a whole range of reasons and conditions, and that's really difficult. I mean, my heart just aches for the world at the minute, for the people who have circumstances which will make this their lives even more difficult than it was. I mean, this is tough. This is really tough. So I think it feels kind of bipolar in a sense. Yes, I think there will be some of us who can see and in some way have a beneficial look at their lives, and that's a helpful and a wholesome thing. But our hearts really have to also go towards those who are really going to struggle and are still in that place.
Yes. So what is next for you when we have the opportunity to sort of have a next? I mean, I think we're all moving, but it feels a little bit like we're moving in a small box versus a more substantial box. What do you hope to continue to do, or what avenues do you want to pursue?
That's such an interesting question, and no one's ever asked me that, actually, because I find myself mostly just here. I have these aspirations, I have these dreams that maybe I felt like in my scientific career I had made it to a point where I wanted to be. And in this mindfulness world, or the mindfulness business, I kind of feel that I don't really need to make it anywhere. I'm blessed because in my little community, I have reach out groups, I run courses, and things progress at a very small, steady pace. I have a very big commitment to my family. My children are very young, so really my priority is to be their mum and be available to them as best as I can. So that's the main focus, and keep supporting the people that I am supporting, but I don't feel I need to really be anywhere big or doing anything terribly different. Sometimes I have these, or I notice these sort of dreams of or notions of looking at the people that I call the big people in the fields that I work in, and I think, oh, wouldn't it be great to meet them? Wouldn't it be great to have a conversation with them and understand a bit more of their minds and their take on things? So if I had an aspiration, it would be something like that, I think, to have a one-to-one time with someone that I really respected, and just share a conversation with them. Yeah.
So I have known of you for almost 20 years.
20 years?
Yeah, well, because I've been with Dr. Mary for almost 19 years. So I have known of Sandra McCutcheon for a long time.
Okay.
No, it's good. But I feel like I started to get to know you only very recently because you were so, I'm trying to think how to put this, because I think it's kind of central to why I wanted to talk to you. You reached out when Dr. Mary and I started to go down this journey of his alcoholism and our sobriety. And you reached out in such a genuine and quietly profound way that I felt instantly. I read one message from you and felt instantly that I had a kinship with you. It was really incredible. I mean, hundreds of people reached out, and the response was so exquisite in the truest sense of the word. But because I had always known of you, and I knew you had this great big science brain, which of course it's Maz's science and the people that he surrounded himself with in those years of incredible learning at the John Innes Center and Hull and all those places that probably makes me feel most insecure, because math and science are just, wow, are those not in my wheelhouse? So to know that you were from that time, that you have this massive capacity to think and problem solve, and that you could also cross over into this realm that connected to me, is a really amazing thing. So I mostly wanted to meet you to say thank you.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really kind, Dana. And it's a special conversation, actually, because obviously, oh, bless your heart. Hand on hearts for all the love. You okay?
Yep.
Yeah, it's okay. These big emotions, they sometimes pop out, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Kleenex, please.
It's okay. It's
Thank
okay.
you.
Tea and Kleenex.
I don't have a tea, Dr. Mary. Where's mine?
Oh, don't you start calling me that.
I thought I would try it and see what it was like. It feels not right.
No, that's his great fear, is that others will think they have to call him that now.
Oh, you okay, Dana?
I am. Thank you.
I think this is the thing. One of the things about compassion-based mindfulness is that you see readily that we're all the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was practicing the other day a practice, and it's called Just Like Me. Yeah, sounds dead simple, just like me. So you, lovely friend, you're just like me. You have joy in your life. You have some things that give you so much richness. You You do things to look after yourself. You have worries, you have woes, you have fears, you have insecurities. You're just like me. And I think there's something so deep about these ancient practices that are steeped in good, modern neuroscience and clinical research. Its foundation is that we're all connected. We're all connected. And when we practice them, if we notice that someone's sore or hurting, then we see that they're just like me.
Yeah.
Just like me. So I think when I read about the story, when you shared about Maz and your experience, you and Maz were completely intertwined. It was not Maz's alcoholism.
Yeah.
Alcoholism affected everybody, your wider family, your relationships. So I think when I read about it, my heart felt quite sore for him, knowing that, well, I could just imagine the pressure, you know, that had led to that course of action. You know, we talked at the beginning of our conversation that too was stressed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I drank a bit more in those days because I wanted to try and get to sleep.
Yeah.
You know, or I couldn't cope. I needed a bit of softening, take the edge off that mind. But I didn't go into alcoholism. My trickiness was around the working of my mind. That's how it panned out. That became the addiction of fighting, being fearful of my mind, you know. But when I read about that, I thought about Maz and the struggles that had led to that, and just how painful his life must have been. Mm-hmm. And how, you know, you have to live another life. You put these masks on. I said that to you at the beginning. People might not have known, you know, the pain that he was experiencing because he carried on as normal. Mm-hmm. And then I thought of you having to live that life through deceit and the negotiations, and how difficult it is to try and support someone. Number one, when they might deny that there's a problem, but you can feel it, yeah. And actually you care about each other so much, and it's so hard to see someone experiencing such difficulty. So although I wasn't in your shoes, because you're just like me, I could imagine what that would have felt like, and knew that it must have been so difficult. So I just wanted to reach out to say that. And but also I know that through darkness, usually there's often light. Mm-hmm. Might not show up when we want it to. For me, my mind didn't get fixed. I had to experience the difficulty for many years. But then look at the joy that it's given me now. Look how I seem to have found a comfortable place within myself. They're not needing to be the best scientist, being okay with good enough, being happy and appreciative from a lot, you know, not striving to be any different from who I already am inside. Whereas the previous version of me didn't like the just good enoughness, didn't like the not being perfect, not being light, not fitting in. I'm very okay with all of that. I'm quite happy to fit out and,
Me too.
and live a simple life. I'm happy not to be caught up in social comparisons. I'm happy not to feel that I have to look a certain way to be liked. These things are all okay. So I think it was that reaching in, just trying to understand and respond compassionately, but then knowing that you've come through that and you're sharing your light with the world in order to help others. It's one of the biggest acts of compassion. And I really felt that. So I thought it was an amazing and a brave and courageous thing to do.
Wow. Thank you. I have loved our time together, and am so grateful that we finally got to
meet. Me too.
And, you know, we're in England a lot, so we will find our way north
Yes.
because someone owes me a trip to Scotland anyway. So we're on our way there. We will find the right time to come and meet you and your spouse and your children. And you can see that I will be like about a foot taller than you, and we'll just laugh about that and take a picture and move on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, it's been a great chat.
Oh, I've
I didn't really say hello to Maz. I should say.
Oh, you don't have to if you got stuff to do.
No, but I would like to. Yeah, is that all right, Dana?
You know what? I'll stop the recording and then you can talk about anything you want because we'll keep the camera rolling.
Oh, fantastic! Is that? Do you have time to do that?
We've got all the time in the world. Sandra, thank you so much for your time today. I loved it. Maz will be right back.
Is the language that speaks often the truth, their feelings, you know. So the thoughts can tell us a good old story. Some of the thoughts are true, but the state of our body state, our conditioning, our experience in the body speaks the truth, you know. So for example, I used to have a visceral fear of heights. Me and Andy went to Bloomin' Gibraltar for a day trip when we were in the south of Spain. And they have these cable cars that go up and down the mountain. And you can get in it. I timed it. It takes 31 seconds to go from the bottom to the top.
Wow.
And within that 31 seconds of me standing watching it for 45 minutes, I died at least 800 times because of the thought of going up this thing that was built by the Swiss Army in the Second World War, and it doesn't have testing and there's no servicing on it. And so the thought is, if I go in that, I'm going to die. I'm not coming out alive. I'm going to stop breathing, or I'll have a heart attack, or God forbid, it's going to fall out of the sky. It's going to happen in my watch. So that thought's not true, but it feels real because my mouth is dry because of the stress response, my heart's pumping, all of the stuff. So it's this sort of real connection with our body that speaks the truth. So in that AA meeting situation, you know, that kinship, it's coming from that visceral truthfulness of the heart, the body's connection and understanding between common experience, isn't it? Yeah, common humanity.
Yeah.
That we're all in it together. Yeah, whether we've stopped drinking for one day or whether we've stopped drinking for 100 days. And it's that, there's a lovely poem, you should look it up, Self-Observation Without Judgment. It's by Dana Folds. And that's one of the things that I think when we can relate to ourselves with kindness and compassion rather than judgment, you know, we all feel better in the end. And it's, these are qualities that connect us to other people rather than them, other people saying, oh, look at the state of you, you know, that, you know, you're in this because of this, you know.
It's weird. A long time ago, because Dana used to teach before I got into it. She once said to me that being a parent makes you a better teacher. And I always remembered that because as I grew in my relationship with Quinn as he was growing up, because I met Dana with Quinn when he was 5, I thought, yeah, man, this must be it, because I could relate to how would I explain something to Quinn. And now I think surviving and being on this side of being a happy alcoholic enjoying sobriety, I think it's made me a better teacher as well.
Yeah, it does. I think we can only practice from our experience. You know, most mindfulness teachers have come to be teachers through their need for self-development or a big awakening or a big difficulty, you know, a real look at their lives. And we teach from our own practice, you know. Every practice that we teach, it's not scripted. You can get plenty of free scripts off the internet, but you teach from your own inner experience. Whatever's going on, you teach from there, you know, within whichever topic it is that you're teaching on. Yeah. Oh, you're amazing, both of you, coming through all of that.
Well, I've had a good teacher.
Well, we were lucky, and it was work, which is, pretty much everybody's experience through life. Some of it is luck, and some of it is work, and some of it is just, you got to put one foot in front of the other, because that's the only option.
I said this to Dana a few weeks ago. We have some essential services that have stayed open through all this social distances, like grocery stores, for example, and of course, other things like that. But I didn't want to sound like an ex-smoker. An ex-smoker goes, God stinks in here, who's smoking?
Yeah.
I was driving back, because I still go to work to feed my fish in my aquaponic bays. And I was just driving home, and I thought, yeah, essential work. Why are the liquor stores all open? And
it's interesting. Can I ask you guys a question? So it's really interesting seeing the sort of political decisions that are being made by your president